Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill. So, I don't know if anybody's watching or not, but anyway, you can watch later if you're not watching now. So, this is A Bitter Pill. I haven't done a video in a while, and tonight I wanted to talk about the ongoing efforts to ban the social media application TikTok, which has roughly about 170 million users in the United States. So just the other day, Congress voted something like 350 to 62, I believe it was, for a bill that would essentially demand that the parent company of TikTok, ByteDance, which is based in China, sell the company off to whatever other foreign investors there are. Presumably, they want them to sell to US investors, or else TikTok will be banned in the United States. So, I wanted to just talk about what exactly is driving this mad dash to try and ban TikTok. And I only heard about this a couple of days ago. Now, I knew that back when Donald Trump was president, there was a push by Trump to try and get TikTok banned, that at the time was mainly driven by this notion that ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, is a Chinese-owned company, and supposedly, it's controlled by the Chinese government. TikTok supposedly is, and they were going to use it to spy on Americans and so on and so forth. But they never produced any evidence that that was the case. And nonetheless, there was an attempt to ban TikTok back then when Trump was president that was overruled by the Supreme Court, and it kind of faded from public view for a while. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Congress starts debating this bill that was introduced about a year ago by a Republican congressman from Wisconsin named Gallagher, I believe. I'll show you the bill itself in just a moment. But basically, it really gathered steam, this desire to ban TikTok, after the escalation of the conflict in Palestine between Israel and Hamas and other armed groups in Palestine after the October 7th Hamas militant-led attack on the military bases and settlements surrounding Gaza, an attempt to break the blockade on Gaza that had been ongoing for the past 17 years. And so, as you might know, if you spend a lot of time on social media, overwhelmingly the sentiment in social media, even here in the United States, the epicenter of government support for Israel, the primary source for decades of military funding for Israel, the sentiment has been very much against Israel perpetrating this genocidal assault on Gaza and just all the bloodshed in general. So something like 70% of Americans support a ceasefire. And so naturally, that's reflected in the content on social media. And this notion developed that somehow on TikTok, where a lot of the demographics of TikTok's users here in the United States is very tilted toward the younger generations. And that's also the demographic that is most against what is happening in Israel and Palestine right now. So these politicians and media pundits and so forth got it in their heads that, or at least they pretended, if they knew better, that China behind the scenes was orchestrating all this criticism of Israel and support for the Palestinian cause. And so they decided to try to nip it in the bud by banning TikTok. But this drive to ban TikTok, as I mentioned, went back to the Trump era. And at that time, it was largely driven by this notion that, China is gathering data on Americans through TikTok, and that they are pushing propaganda to people in the United States. And so you might say that the fact that there was a preponderance of criticism of Israel versus support for Israel, and support for the Palestinians versus criticism on TikTok was, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, the thing that pushed this debate over the edge toward, hey, let's push this bill through to ban TikTok. So let me show you the bill now. Okay, so it's called the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. So they're claiming that TikTok is a foreign adversary controlled applications application, social media application. But note that it's worded in a very broad way, so they could conceivably say, well, other social media apps are also foreign controlled, so we can ban those too. So, summary of the bill here. This bill prohibits distributing, maintaining, or providing internet hosting services for a foreign adversary controlled application, e.g. TikTok. However, the prohibition does not apply to a covered application that executes a qualified divestiture as determined by the president. In other words, whatever foreign entity that's deemed an adversary that has shares in the app, if they sell their share of ownership of the app, then they won't ban it. Under the bill, a foreign adversary controlled application is directly or indirectly operated by one, ByteDance Limited, or TikTok, including their subsidiaries or successors, or two, a social media company that's controlled by a foreign adversary, perhaps some other app and some other quote unquote foreign adversary, and has been determined by the president to present a significant threat to national security. The prohibition does not apply to an application that is primarily used to post product reviews, business reviews, or travel information and reviews. So the question I have is, well, what about other totally apolitical content, which most of the content on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter /X or whatever is. So, how do you determine what the prohibition does or doesn't apply to? The bill authorizes the Department of Justice to investigate violations of the bill and enforce the bill's provisions. The entities that violate the bill are subject to civil penalties based on the number of users. The bill requires a covered application to provide a user with all available account data at the user's request before the prohibition takes effect. The bill gives the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia exclusive jurisdiction over any challenges to the bill. Further, that's odd. I hadn't noticed that before. Why that particular court? They must think that court would favor them. Further, a challenge to the bill must be brought within 165 days after the bill's enactment date. A challenge to any action, finding, or determination under the bill must be brought within 90 days of the action, finding, or determination. So it's a little less than 6 months. Okay, so let's see how the vote went here. Okay, this was voted in the House of Representatives on Wednesday. And as you can see, the vote was overwhelmingly, yeah, let's ban TikTok. Let's go after TikTok. 352 to 65, present 1, not voting 14. And with that kind of margin, of course, you can guess that both parties overwhelmingly supported it. So 50 nays in the Democrats, 15 nays in the Republicans versus vast majority favoring. So well, let's see here. Okay, so I've got Indiana up here because I live in Indiana. All my Congress people, both Democratic and Republican, voted in favor of the bill. Let's see. I'm curious, who were the Republicans and then who were the Democrats that voted against it? Matt Gaetz, so Thomas Massie, yeah, not anybody else that I recognize. Democrats, you have Jamal Bowman from New York. Well, basically all the squad voted against it. So I guess they're not good for very much, but at least in this particular case, they voted against censorship. Okay, well, let's talk in a little more detail about what's driving this impetus. So Michael Tracy had a pretty good article, I thought, about that, published in Newsweek. He said, banning TikTok is a power grab for the deep state. Okay, where did it go? There we go. Legislators have made exceedingly clear that the intent of the bill they're currently fast-tracking through Congress is to finally ban TikTok in the United States, as Representative Elise Stefanik, chair of the House Republican Conference, proudly put it. TikTok must be banned, concurred Guy, whatever, Republican from Pennsylvania. No one is trying to disguise anything, clarified Representative Dan Crenshaw, eye patch dude from Texas. We want to ban TikTok. Why now? Drafters of the bill are said to have received, quote, technical assistance from the White House. President Biden swiftly pledged to sign it. If it was passed in both the House and Senate, it would go to his desk. Among the factors that are said to have spurred this latest outburst of legislative activity was a secret briefing last week by the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the Director of National Intelligence. Because it was a classified hearing, I cannot discuss the details, explained Representative Morgan Griffith, a member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which sprung into action after receiving the secret, quote, Intelligence Committee community presentation. So basically, the details of the alleged justification for passing this bill are not available to us. It was a secret hearing. And, as I said, I only became aware of this bill like at the beginning of this week. And all of a sudden, Wednesday, it passes with, just very little public comment or discussion. I mean, there was a lot once it became clear, but so little time. So this committee passed it or endorsed the bill 50-0. The bill names TikTok as a foreign adversary controlled application, with the adversary in question being in China. But it also goes further. This is in the details of the bill that I didn't read you because I just read you the summary, and prohibits, quote, applications associated with a standard litany of official U.S., quote, adversaries, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Another provision now this is, I may have mentioned this in the video description, but there's kind of a Trojan horse attached to this bill. Let me see if I'm sharing the right one with you here. Yeah, okay. Just want to be sure about that. Another provision authorizes a president, currently Joe Biden, soon possibly Donald Trump, to make unilateral determinations about whether certain applications, quote, present a significant threat to the national security of the United States and therefore must be banned like TikTok. The criteria for making such a determination is left conspicuously vague. So, in other words, this bill not only is proposing to ban TikTok within 6 months, assuming that the ByteDance, the parent company, doesn't sell their shares off of TikTok within 6 months. But it also allows the president to unilaterally decide to just ban applications. So, I mean, obviously, even if it weren't for that, this would be a clear violation of the First Amendment, right? And that it was on precisely those grounds that the Supreme Court struck down Donald Trump's attempt to ban TikTok, which, by the way, interestingly enough, and I'm sure this is purely political posturing on his part, but Donald Trump is now suddenly against this attempt to ban TikTok, because he wants to get elected. I'm guessing it was a real reason. I mean, he could have had a change of heart. I don't know, but it seems a little suspicious that he was pushing so strongly for it a few years ago, and now all of a sudden he's against it, maybe because Joe Biden is for it. So Michael Tracy goes on to say, while China may not have a First Amendment right to operate commercial enterprise in the United States, American citizens are certainly afforded First Amendment protections against their speech being abridged by the government. Punitive state intervention to blockade Americans from a massively popular social media platform, which they had otherwise used voluntarily to consume the speech of others and express their own speech, would be a speech abridging action by the federal government of a magnitude that has no obvious precedent. Now, of course, we're all familiar, if we're on social media, with YouTube taking videos down on dubious grounds, or people being kicked off of Facebook or Twitter/X, and so on and so forth, having warnings attached to your videos or comments, or told that you're violating hate speech regulations on a platform when you clearly haven't done so, because you, for instance, say the Israeli government and military are acting like Nazis or something like that. But totally banning a platform in the United States would be quite a big step beyond all that we've seen thus far in the war on free speech that is going on in the United States. And isn't it interesting how, you had mainly Democrats going after people for expressing certain points of view, such as, on a trans issue, or on Russiagate and so forth, pushing for censorship. And you had, for instance, right before the 2020 election, the content of Hunter Biden's laptop that suggested massive corruption associated with Ukraine on the part of him and perhaps Joe Biden. And the initial stories published about this were completely censored from Facebook and Twitter, and I'm assuming other social media apps. You couldn't even talk about it, or certainly not share a story about it. And the New York Post, which first broke the story, was thrown off of Twitter for a few days, I think it was. But most of the opposition to doing that was from Republicans, for obvious reasons. This censorship was designed to cover up something that made Joe Biden look bad. And now all of a sudden, Republicans are even more in favor of censorship, in this case by banning TikTok, than Democrats. So kind of interesting. Okay, I'll just read this last paragraph here, and then we'll talk about some other aspect of this. The drive to ban TikTok has parallels to the European Union rushing to ban RT and other Russian-owned media outlets after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Thanks to the unique inherences of the First Amendment, the U.S. cannot be so easily compelled to take such blunt force censorship action. However, ardently, American political and media elites might have shared the anti-Russian sentiments of their EU counterparts. Those inherences will surely be eroded if Congress plows ahead with its feverishly expedited TikTok ban. Indeed. Excellent point, Michael. Now, what I thought was interesting about the controversy around this ban is that, of all people, the Washington Post, of all media outlets or whatever, the Washington Post had a nice article debunking some of the justifications given for this proposed ban. So they say TikTok was slammed for its pro-Palestinian hashtags, but it's not alone. The app's critics in Washington say the difference in views between pro-Israel and pro-Palestine is proof of mass brainwashing, but in reality, Facebook and Instagram show the same imbalance. Gosh, imagine that. Across different social media apps, most of the content is against genocide. Who would have thought, So they say when congressional Republicans this month repeated their long-running calls for a nationwide ban on TikTok, they highlighted a data point they said was proof of the app's sinister underpinnings. The number of TikTok videos with the free Palestine hashtag is dramatically higher than those with the Stand with Israel hashtag. I can't talk tonight. That gap, they said, offered evidence that the app, owned by the Chinese tech giant ByteDance, was being used to boost propaganda and brainwash American viewers. But Facebook and Instagram, TikTok's US-based rivals, show a remarkably similar gap, their data show. On Facebook, the Free Palestine hashtag is found on more than 11 million posts, 39 times more than those with Stand with Israel. On Instagram, the pro-Palestinian hashtag is found on 6 million posts, 26 times more than the pro-Israel hashtag. So, if obviously this completely demolishes the argument that they're making that they have to ban this app because presumably because of so-called Chinese control. It's biased in favor of pro-Palestinian and Israeli government and military action critical content. So they have to protect our youth from this foreign manipulation of people's opinions about the conflict in Palestine, or the genocide in Palestine. In an essay for a blog called The Free Press, Representative Mike Gallagher, a Wisconsin Republican who sponsored the bill, is the main sponsor, and presumably the staff wrote the bill, said the app was brainwashing our youth against the country and our allies with rampant pro-Hamas propaganda and was perhaps the largest scale malign influence operation ever conducted. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie said TikTok was polluting the minds of American young people with anti-Semitic horrible stuff that their algorithms were pushing out at a gargantuan rate. Representative Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat, said last week that the Justice Department should monitor China's use of TikTok as a propaganda machine to influence Americans. TikTok has said repeatedly that its recommendation algorithm and content rules are not influenced by the Chinese government. And TikTok's critic, I think this is a really crucial point here, TikTok's critics, such as the above, have provided no evidence beyond noting that there's more pro-Palestinian than pro-Israel content on TikTok. In a blog post Monday, TikTok said it had been unfairly singled out for criticism based on misinformation and mischaracterization, arguing that so the comparison also does not factor in the longstanding generational gap around people's attitude toward the Israel-Gaza dispute. 52% of voters between the ages of 18 and 34, the age range most popular with TikTok, told a poll this month that they disapproved of Israel's response to Hamas's attack. And certainly something like 80% support a ceasefire. And interestingly enough, both TikTok and Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, ban content promoting Hamas, which all these politicians are claiming is rampant on TikTok. TikTok said it had removed more than 925,000 videos for promoting Hamas or otherwise violating the app's policies around violence, hate speech, misinformation, and terrorism between the October 7th attack and the end of the month. So, in fact, both Meta, owner of Facebook and Instagram, and TikTok have been accused by activists who support Palestine of skewing their content in favor of Israel by banning the content that I just mentioned. So on one hand, you have Congress people claiming that due to alleged foreign influence, TikTok is biased in favor of the Palestinian side, and you have pro-Palestinian activists saying TikTok is biased in favor of Israel, or it's less biased against Israel or less critical of Israel, let's say, than you would expect if TikTok wasn't sort of tipping the scales. Senator Josh Hawley requested unanimous consent to ban TikTok across the United States in a speech on the Senate floor Wednesday. He pointed to protests in colleges and high schools after the Hamas assaults and said, where are they being fed this propaganda? They're finding it on TikTok. Senator Hawley, first of all, they're posting content on TikTok. They're not just passively reading content that's coming from somewhere else. Most of the content that Americans are reading on TikTok is being posted on it by fellow American users, right? That's who most of our friends are on social media, is people who are from the same country we're from, and so on and so forth. Senator Rand Paul, who I disagree with on all sorts of issues, is really good on free speech issues like this one. And he said, Hawley's ban proposal was McCarthyist paranoia, propagating hysteria and fear of subtle communist subversion from the People's Republic of China. The idea comes while the GOP simultaneously complains of liberal U.S. social media companies canceling and censoring conservatives, Paul said. Without a hint of irony, many of these same quote, conservatives now agitate to censor viewpoints they don't like. And I've seen this on X, over the past 5 months where, uniformly, well, not uniformly, because Paul's kind of conservative too, but, the vast majority of prominent conservatives on social media not only support Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank, but they support censoring people who are critical of them. And of course, those of us on the left, for the most part, have been speaking very strongly against this ban. There's a petition going around. I'm not sure who started it, but Jill Stein is pushing it. Maybe her campaign promoted it. And of course, this is a TikTok post here, a TikTok video that she posted explaining her rationale. So let's take a listen.
So Joe Biden recently said that he will sign this outrageous bill making its way through Congress that basically bans TikTok if Congress passes the bill.
Okay, I'm not sure how the
This is
volume was,
absolutely
so I'm
unforgivable,
going to
and
start it
we
over.
have to. So Joe Biden recently said that he will sign this outrageous bill making its way through Congress that basically bans TikTok if Congress passes the bill. This is absolutely unforgivable, and we have to stop them. Not only because 170 million Americans are on TikTok, including Joe Biden, by the way, but because this is just the latest assault on free speech by government and big tech through censoring and controlling the internet and social media and information in general. As you know, TikTok is the main platform for young people to check in with each other, and people are furious with the abuse they've been handed by the economic and political elites. People can't pay their rent, they can't buy their groceries, they can't afford college. There's a climate crisis crashing down on your future, while both parties are squandering our dollars, our money on endless war and genocide, which this generation vehemently opposes, not because you have been propagandized by TikTok, which is what they would have you believe, but because you haven't been brainwashed out of your humanity. And thank you for that. We refuse to let that happen. We're not going to let the elites shut down this last remaining vehicle for free speech. You can help stop the TikTok ban right now by signing the pledge to stop TikTok censorship. You can do that at jillstein2024.com/TikTok. Sign it, share it, and let's tell these predatory politicians that we will not vote for any candidate who supports this attack on our free speech. It's time to use the power of our numbers and demand the democracy we deserve. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, so I mean, she makes a really good point here that first of all, young people overwhelmingly get their news from social media rather than by listening to um, the you know uh, legacy media, watching CNN or MSNBC or Fox or whatever. So naturally, you're going to get a more unfiltered perspective on what's happening in places like Palestine. And furthermore, she points out that we have all these concerns here at home about healthcare and the state of the economy and so forth. Like young people can't afford to buy a house or pay rent or afford food very easily, even. And here we are squandering all this money, sending what is it, like $100 billion plus to Ukraine to fund that war, and now sending all this money to Israel to commit genocide, when that money could be used here at home to address things that are of concern to all of us, but many of which are of a special concern to young people, like paying for college, paying off student loan debts, affording rent, affording to buy a house and so forth. Our infrastructure is crumbling all over the place. Flint still hasn't finished fixing their water pipes that have poisoned so many people in Flint, Michigan. After all this time, and similar state of affairs for infrastructure of all sorts across the country. We're squandering all these resources on the military and not addressing those issues. And so, many of us, especially those of us, which I'm not one, but those of us who are on the younger side, are being hit very hard by this neglect of our government in favor of these foreign wars and, in this case, genocide. So, obviously, this isn't Chinese propaganda that's causing people to both view and share content on social media, critical of U.S. foreign policy. And this whole notion that this or any other app, social media app, is controlled by China is just ludicrous. So let me see if I can find you some stats. I know I have this somewhere, but I forget which article I saw this in. So let me just say from memory here, rather than taking time to look for it. The vast majority of the ownership of the parent corporation of TikTok, ByteDance, is foreigners, not people in China. Something like 20% of those who own shares in ByteDance, which is the parent company of both TikTok and what's it called, Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, which they have a separate app in China from TikTok, which is in much of the rest of the world. And something like 1% of the Chinese government does this a lot with companies. They buy a small share in private companies, so they've got like 1% ownership of ByteDance. But the CEO of I believe of TikTok is from Singapore, and there was this crazy testimony that he gave before Congress. He was hauled before Congress to criticize him about how TikTok was spreading this propaganda emanating from the Chinese government to try and brainwash Americans. And they asked him, "Are you a member of the Communist Party of China?" The CCP is what they call it. The Communist Party of China is his actual name. But anyway, they asked him that, and they asked him, did he have dual citizenship, Singapore and the United States? And he's like, no, I'm from Singapore. That's the only country I've ever lived in. That's where my citizenship is. I served in the military in Singapore. My wife is American. My kids are American. TikTok actually has its headquarters in Silicon Valley, like most tech corporations do. It's in no way a Chinese corporation. In fact, I'm pretty sure the majority of ownership of ByteDance is American, but in any case, a very large percentage of it. And there just isn't any evidence. They haven't presented any evidence for this notion that, let me get rid of. There just isn't any evidence for this notion that China is either influencing content on TikTok or that they are, as they've also been accused of, mining data from TikTok users. And it's so hypocritical for politicians and media pundits to be screaming about supposed Chinese interference in American politics, in China's brainwashing Americans, China's stealing your private data, et cetera, et cetera. While we have probably the most propagandized population in the world in terms of all the fucking lies that our government and our corporate media shove down people's throats, endlessly repeating over and over, Russian interference in the 2016 election. Trump and Russia colluded to get Trump elected and Hillary Clinton defeated, and on. No evidence of that. No, Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Gaddafi was giving his troops Viagra and telling them to go rape people as a weapon of war. And of course, you know about all the lies that have been told on behalf of Israel in the Israel-Palestine conflict, or Israeli genocide, however we want to refer to it. And of course, as Edward Snowden and many others revealed, our government is constantly spying on us through, looking at, for instance, the information we share on social media. Our private information, as well as the content that we share, and what we click on, what we like, et cetera, et cetera. All of that. The U.S. government can access. So, I don't know that they have the same access to TikTok because it's not a U.S. owned company that may not have the same control over that as they do over, say, X or Facebook and so on and so forth. So they'd like to change that by having TikTok overwhelmingly be a U.S. owned corporation. And of course, if they can force ByteDance and basically all Chinese investors to divest from TikTok, if they can push China-based shareholders out, well, that cuts them out of profits from TikTok and opens up more opportunity for American investors. And in fact, the former Secretary of the Treasury under Donald Trump, whose name I'm blanking on at the moment, but anyway, he is apparently putting together a group of investors to buy TikTok if and when ByteDance doesn't divest from TikTok, and it's on the verge of being banned. Or, excuse me, I should say, if they agree to sell, there's American investors right there ready to buy their shares. It's in part an effort to try and silence our criticism of U.S. foreign policy, which of course is doomed to fail because, of course, if TikTok gets banned, people will, as they already do, share the same content on other social media apps. And it's an attempt to, is part of the financial competition between the U.S. and China, where they're trying to pave the way for greater profits for U.S. investors and less for Chinese investors. But obviously, this is a huge threat to our First Amendment rights, our freedom of speech, for them to be pushing this ban, and in addition, having this sort of Trojan horse embedded in the bill that allows, that gives the President of the United States unilateral authority to, if he deems some other app a threat due to foreign influence or something, that he can just decide to ban those apps too. And of course, the irony of all this is that there is a country, not China, but Israel, that has completely unimpeded ability to try and manipulate public opinion and manipulate legislation and other actions by the U.S. government. And there's an obvious, major foreign influence on U.S. policy, on what we see in the media, and so forth. And it's not China, it's not Russia, it's Israel. And as I was saying before, the Israeli lobby is, it's kind of ramped up its already enormous activities to push policies and media content and so forth favorable to Israel. and to stifle censor criticism of Israel. And this bill is, or at least the fact that this bill just all of a sudden out of the blue sailed through the House of Representatives is an indication of that influence. Kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, this ramping up of Israeli pressure on U.S. legislators. So anyway, I hope that we can put a stop to this. It sounds like there's a lot less likelihood of it passing the Senate. I'm not sure why, given how overwhelmingly it passed the House. But for whatever reason, there seems to be more opposition in the Senate. And again, there is a 6-month window where we can continue to fight back against this legislation, even if it passes the Senate and Joe Biden signs it, which he's promised he will. And also, hopefully everybody who supported this bill will pay the price at the polls in the fall. So anyway, hopefully you found this informative, and please like and share and subscribe to the channel. There we go. My channel on YouTube is at The Bitter Pill. I'm also simulcasting my live streams to X and Facebook. And I have a Substack blog, jeffmelton.substack.com, which I hope you will check out. I typically post an article there about once a month, sometimes more often. And of course, there's the videos. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Stay tuned to further political commentary from The Bitter Pill. I will see you next time.